Welcome to Inside Marketing with Market Surge, your front row seat to the boldest ideas and smartest strategies in the marketing game. Your host is Reed Hansen, Chief Growth Officer at Market Surge.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Marketing with Market Surge. Most people think writing a book is the finish line. Turns out it's actually where the confusion starts. Today's guest has spent over 30 years studying how people thrive, and more importantly, how they turn ideas into something that actually changes lives and builds businesses. Lee Baucom, PhD, is a 7-time author, coach, and the creator of the Book to Business Blueprint, a framework that helps authors realize something most of them completely miss. Your book isn't the product, it's the doorway. And the wild part, most authors walk right past the business hiding inside their own work. We're going to unpack why finishing a book is actually the most dangerous moment for an author, how to extract a scalable business from what you've already written, and why you don't need burnout to make it work. Lee, welcome to the show.
Reed, thanks for having me. I like the fact that you put in that's where the confusion starts, because that's really, that's what I see, that look in the eyes.
Just as a side note, my wife has her own business, a photography studio, recently published a book. So I'm very interested in this topic just for our own family's interest, but this is a great topic. I'm glad you made contact here. So you said that finishing a book is one of the most confusing moments for authors. Why would you say that?
So it ends up being this momentous occasion for them that they're like, oh, I'm done. I'm finished. And I remember I was at an event with my publisher, and I was sitting with an author, and I'd already been through several books at that point and was actually helping put this on. And he said, oh man, I'm so glad that's behind me. I'm like, 5% is done now. And he just stared at me. He was like, what do you mean? I'm like, this is when you decide what you're going to do with the book, because the book is, and this is where the confusion sets in. Many people think the sales of the book is what they're after, like the money from the sales. And that's nice, but statistics are in our way. There are not many books that make much money on the sales. And so the question is, what happens next? And that, for me, was part of the confusion. So let's go back a little bit on what happened. I was at a switch in my career. I was trained as a therapist, but was frustrated with how ineffective marital therapy in particular was. And so I spent 3 more years getting trained after getting a PhD and a couple of masters. I spent 3 more years doing training as a coach. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to complain about this, I need to say what I believe. I can't just shoot at this target. And so I wrote what I believed, and that began to be the core of what became the Save the Marriage system. At that point, it was just me reflecting on what does work. And so when I decided to make that into a book, I had somebody, this is back in 1999 on the internet. I mean, it was hard to put a website out at that point. So I had a pretty janky website that had this on it. And I had someone who had said, you know, while you're waiting for it to be published, why don't you put it up as an ebook? There was no Amazon telling us what an ebook was. So I said, what do you mean by that? And we got to the bottom of that. And so I did that. And I thought, okay, so now I'm this coach therapist guy who's in my office and I'll just do the sales on the side. It took me 2 years to figure out that was the beginning of a business. It took me a little longer than that to figure out how to put it together. And so that's the confusion. Many people first think they're going to sell the book. Second, they don't know what to do other than to try to market the book itself. And the book, as you said, is just the starting point for the business that can come out of it.
So let me pull that thread a little bit. So what did the business look like that emerged out of that first book? What did it turn into? Was this more clientele for your portfolio for counseling, or was it something else?
Yeah, that's where it started. So again, it's probably 2000 at that point, because the book came out in December 99. So I started getting a couple of phone calls. And now this is back in the day where I'm in my office picking up a phone and answering it. And these people were calling me from all over and asking for more help. And the first time it happened, I thought, what have I gotten myself into? This book is everywhere, or could be everywhere. And this person was asking for more help. And while I was seeing only people in my office at that point, now we haven't gotten virtual coaching / therapy until pretty recently, very recently, thanks to the pandemic. But back then, we were seeing people in the office just thinking that was the regular thing. And this person's calling me going, hey, I need some help with this. So I thought, okay, I can do the coaching from wherever with the phone. And that's how it started. I had to figure out how to get the schedules in line back then and how to take payments and all of that stuff. And we just coached by phone. So that that and for a while I was like, okay, this is just this little side thing. I'm still at my office. I'm still seeing people. I'm still doing the regular thing. And yeah, on the side, I'll see a person here or there. And that began to grow. And so that was the first thing. You're right. It was more of that, except different. It was now worldwide. It was also by phone. It was so all of these things were coming in that I had to create on the fly. Still thinking that's just a little side thing. And then I started realizing that people were needing some extra pieces. And that led to me creating some courses. Basically, at that point, I was going, I don't want to have to keep answering the same question over and over because it's keeping us slow in the whole coaching thing. So I created these mini courses along the way. Turned out those were products. And so finally, it was like 2 or 3 years in, I went, oh, this is a whole business thing I need to put together. And so that led to the extra courses, some books that also pointed people back to the program, and then a kind of a membership program to help people get the training they needed, the answers to questions, things like that. And all of that came just as I finally went, oh, wait, there's something else here.
Okay. Now you've talked about a hidden framework inside every book. What does that mean? And how does that help you identify what the business is inside of a book?
So the reason it's hidden is sometimes because the people writing the book are so familiar with it, they don't see it as the framework. So it's hidden. So many times, so first, let me just say that probably is one of my little hidden secret powers. I'm good at identifying the frameworks.
Okay.
And it goes back to when I was in grad school, professors were sending people my way to help with their dissertation or their thesis. And I couldn't figure out why. I just figured that they were doing that. And it turned out it's because I was able to listen to them and go, oh, this is what you're trying to get to. That's the framework. How are you doing what you're doing? So in the world of, let's say, self-help and development, there's a framework of how people work with people. But broader than that, it's true in every field. I had a realtor who wrote a book. And I'm like, well, how do you sell a house? And he said, just like the way you sell the house. And I asked him to walk me through it. And I started noticing he was doing it his way. He had his spin on it. And that was his framework. He just didn't know it because he just did it. It's like saying to a fish, how's the water? And they're like, what are you talking about? This is just what I'm doing. And so identifying the framework is incredibly important to figure out how you're going to verbalize that. That's the piece that somebody says, what do you do? So for me, what do you do? I help people save their marriage. Okay, so that's pretty broad. How do I do it? I've got 3 steps. I got 3 C's, and I can go into that and be pretty specific on how that fits. That's my framework. And then there are sub-frameworks. So I've, along the way, developed some other pieces because I've thought about how do I do it? Simple question of how would I take someone from A to B? What are the steps I take them through to get there? And so tell me a little bit more about your wife's book, just so we make it real life.
Yeah,
Is it a book of photography or about how to do?
It's my wife's photographer, a boudoir photographer specifically. So she works primarily with women, and her book is, I'm going to get the title wrong, but it's a year of body positivity. And so every page is either a meditative practice or a short reading about maintaining positivity for their body. So I'm not sure. We can abandon this track if it doesn't apply.
No, let's go with this
Yeah.
because this is great. Because she may go, I'm just putting these things together for positivity. But when she put them out, she probably laid them out in a certain way to talk people through a step. So you don't just go be body positive. That's what she's doing, but how she gets somebody there is her framework. So she's doing it through some daily meditations. She's showing pictures probably of people who are proving that point, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so the way she's talking about that, the language she uses, the way she structured the book, all points to a framework of how she would do that. So that's the framework that's in there. And so if she said, you know what, I think I want to do, let's say, a little workshop on body positivity. There's the framework that's already there that she would start pulling out and going, how do I lead somebody through that so they can follow this path?
Okay. Interesting. Do you think, so it sounds like, I think my wife's motivation in writing the book, for example, was somewhat of a promotional exercise for her business, maybe a little bit of a magnet, like a lead magnet to get people to find her and something to give her a little bit of credibility. Do you think that sums up what, so in addition to identifying the business model, do you think that sums up what the main purpose entrepreneur writing a book is?
It certainly is a lot of that. So for me, in the beginning, I was just like, this is what I think, and
Okay.
I'm just putting this out there. But I always point out that authority, that term starts with author. So you're doing this to build authority, which is part of what she's doing. You're doing it so people can see your work. They're seeing her work, but they're seeing something else in her work. There are plenty of books that might have similar photos, like if somebody wanted to see boudoir photos for probably different thoughts, but hers is going at a specific direction. Like she's there because this is body positive.
Mhm.
And so she's also creating kind of her frame. Like,
Mhm.
what is she about?
Yeah.
That's different than just a general photography book, right? This is what I'm about. This is what I'm trying to accomplish with this. So she's got credibility. She's giving people a message that is independent of the book. And that's one of the things that I find to be most interesting is how many authors have this very powerful message that just doesn't have anywhere to go. And another conversation at one of those similar events, I asked the person, I'd read his book because I was helping put it on. They handed me all the books. And so I would know these people and I read it. I'm like, this is a really great book. What are you going to do with it? And he said, what do you mean I wrote the book? I'm like, what's next though? Because there's nothing worse in my mind than a message that could change people can't get any further. Like somebody gets to the end of the book and goes, oh gosh, I want to do more. Then there is no more. And the business is the more.
Got it. Okay. So I guess, how does that come to be? What are like the potential branches out of, once you've defined this blueprint? It sounds like when in the self-help world or as a counselor, it seems pretty obvious that is a path that you could just expand it. But what are some of the other possibilities that emerge out of a book with your thought leadership?
Yeah. And so I would say maybe that's a path.
Okay.
Some people may have a departure point. For me, I still do a limited amount of coaching, but I have to draw it down because I have other things that I'm attending to. There is a limit, for instance, to coaching or therapy. You've only got so many hours. And so somebody who does that may be going, how can I expand that? So one of the things I think is very important is, we talked about framework.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know your framework for sure. You also need to know your audience and how they need to get that information. Like what ways might they take that in? And it's usually a multitude. So it could be therapy or coaching or a seminar or a workshop or a retreat or a speech. There are lots of ways to do it, which brings up the third part, which I find to be very important of going, what fits you? What fits the author? I keep throwing in stories, but I think it's illustrative. So I had a person who I was working with, and we talked about his book, and he came in 2 steps past where is sometimes helpful. He had already started down this road. And I said, so what are you doing with your book? He said, I am going to go do speeches.
Okay.
And that's about how he told it to me. And I went, you don't sound very excited about this. And he said, I have a friend who's very successful at this. He wrote a book and he's doing speeches everywhere. Is very popular. And he told me that's what I needed to do. Okay, that is something you could do, but tell me what's wrong with that. And he said, I don't like to leave my family. I like to be at home. I like to be around my family. I really don't like to public speak. I can, but I don't really like it.
Okay.
And I said, so what have you done so far? He had spent several $1,000s on PR material and contacting places and shipping his stuff around. I'm like, so what happens if they start hiring you? Let's just speed this up a little bit. Let's say you're successful at this. Let's say it goes really well. 5 years from now, you have, let's say, 30 or 40 speaking engagements per year. And he just looked at me horrified. And I said, I think you may not have matched it to your temperament. And that's important. How do you want your life to look is an important question.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I definitely get the vibe that like when you talk about writing the book, it emerges out of like organic like thoughts. And then as you structure the business that emerges out of the book, that it is also organic. And this part about emerging out of the book and doing this successfully without a lot of like putting a square peg in a round hole, like how do you make that easier? How do you find that fit that emerges like more quickly? Like how do you know what your calling is out of that book?
It's a great question. and one that often takes a little bit of time because you're going to have to get some feedback. That was one of the things that I was missing the feedback along the way for me. And that was what the delay was. I didn't realize I was building a business. I think you are looking for the signals versus the noise. So signal was that guy calling me because that fit into what I did. I'm like, oh, coaching, I can do this. I have to find a different way of doing it than what I've been doing, but it's in the realm, right? I can understand that. I had another email exchange with a number of people who were writing as therapists who wanted to be certified to use my approach. And the first one, I was like, that's curious. That's just an interesting thing. The second one, I went, that's really weird that like it's not just one person. About the fourth or fifth or sixth one, I started going, gosh, there's a business here.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about that business and in the kind of the wake up moment in the middle of the night going, oh my gosh, if I did that, what would it mean? And it would mean that I had people who were under my name and under my brand doing something, but I couldn't know what. And I started going that's beyond what I'm comfortable with. Could I teach? Sure. I've taught therapists before, so nothing new, but teaching them to do something that's branded by me, whole different ball game. Not particularly interested, and I realized that was noise. And so we're separating out the signals and the noise. And the signals and the noise are often about what would I be comfortable with, what would fit my style. My guy that was going down the speeching path, that was noise. It's just that he had someone who was successfully doing it telling him, and he thought it was a signal until he started running it through the loop.
Got it. Okay. You've gone on to write other books, additional books. Have you had other different opportunities emerge out of these different books, or it's been your experience with the subsequent books?
Yeah, and some of the books are very strategic, and I've figured out how to be more strategic over time. So I created a pretty slim book. So it's an easy read on why marriages fail. It's why marriages fail that points them to how they might take action, right? It's the last chapter, and it is what now? How do you start the process? That's a pretty strategic move, but there are some that are more for me, like I wrote the Forgive process. And the reason I wrote the Forgive process is because I was working with people who were having a hard time letting go of things, moving beyond them. That was purely to here, let me give you this so you can move beyond it. There are a couple of books on thriving that I wrote that are outside my realm, and those are clearly authority books. I have people who come to me for coaching or even to speak on things, but that truly is a side gig. I don't really look for that as something I would build because I put so much energy into a couple of other areas, authors and saving marriages in particular. I have to choose at the beginning, why am I doing this book? What is the purpose of it? That's a missing piece for a lot of people who are just like, I just want to write a book. So what are you hoping to get out of that? Often helps them formulate how they're even going to write the book. When I'm talking with them, sometimes it's 2 beats past that. They've already published. The book is there. And so now we deal with what we have. What's really nice is when it's a couple of steps before that, where we still have some points of saying, how do we want to formulate the next step from within the book?
Okay. I just had to know, you had a health scare that shifted your perspective. How does that influence your work today? How have you thrived past that, per se?
Yeah. So I was in my mid-30s, was busy already with the Save the Marriage stuff and was trying some other things and just was not taking care of myself. Interestingly, all that research on thriving, I had been doing for a number of years. I got really interested. So my complaint about a lot of the psychology I was being taught was psychology seems to be focused a lot on what's wrong with you. And out of that, there was some research that were like surprises to us. They were doing some research early on in Hawaii, when Hawaii was just its own island group and not a destination. And they were trying to figure out what the effects of alcoholism and domestic abuse and some other issues caused for people, what trauma caused, what did it do to them? And then there were some people that snuck in through there that were like, they did fine. Like they had normal lives and they came from the same families. And so they started going, wow, some people are resilient. And so they get to this baseline. And I was sitting there going, yeah, but there's something beyond that. Like, we can have these hard events and grow beyond them. So I have all of this studies that I've done, but was I eating well? Nope. Was I de-stressing? No. Sleeping well? No. Not doing anything to take care of myself. And sure enough, my body went, okay, yeah, we're going to slow you down here. It was a big slowdown though. And the doctors were not sure what was going to happen. And they had the right diagnosis, the wrong prognosis for me in particular. I had an acute version of what could have been a chronic and life-ending illness. And it just so very painful, but resolved itself after, I guess, about 8-9 months of the recovery process. But it was scary enough when the doctor's calling your wife and using his first name and saying, this is not good. This doesn't end well. And so as I finally got to a specialist who said, you're going to be okay, but I can't make you feel better. Everything I do to make you feel better would delay your recovery. So you're just going to have to tough it out. And so that process reminded me, A, we only have so much time, and B, we don't know how much time that is. So C, what are we going to do with the time we have? So I refer to that as bonus time now. And that really brought home to me the fact that what we're here to do is make a difference. So how am I going to make that difference? Everything I work on is making a difference, whether it's helping an author find the best business for them to get their message into the world, or whether I'm helping somebody save their marriage or thrive better. All of that is about how can we make a difference in the world and leave it better than we found it.
Wow, what a nice statement to end on. Thank you so much, Lee. That I feel inspired, and I really appreciate the experience and wisdom you've shared here today. If people would like to work with you, learn more, pick up one of your books, where are some of the links they can find you at?
So let's start with an author who might be going, yes, I want to build a book from this. You need a blueprint. I think that's helpful to take it a step at a time, because one of the things I've noticed is a lot of times people will then have a 6 or 7 figure book and they're overwhelmed. And so we like to take it a step at a time and architecture it and build out what that is. So that's at businessblueprint.com. I've actually got a starter map that people can access there to get started on thinking through that. And I started a podcast there after the book to talk about my experience of what happens after the book and then pointing direction and how others might do that. And then there is a program there that's available for people that want to take that one step at a time. Interested in my books, you can find them all at thriveology.com/books. So Thrive, THRIVE, and then ology.com/books. That'll get you to just a list of the books.
All right. Lee Baucom, it has been a pleasure. I am so glad we met, and thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Want to stay ahead of what's actually working in marketing right now? Head over to marketsurge.io and see how we're helping businesses grow smarter, faster, and louder. That's marketsurge.io, because your next breakthrough shouldn't be a guess.